Hi, everyone. I'm just checking in to talk to you a little bit about a few concepts I want you to think about when you are viewing artwork in a museum or gallery setting, or really any setting. Maybe you're viewing artwork in a friend's home. Maybe you're walking through USC Upstate and viewing artwork in some of our wonderful buildings on campus. But I want you to think about how to define an artwork's subject matter. This is something that you're going to want to discuss in your first assignment for your formal analysis. So sometimes an artwork's subject matter can differ from an artwork's content. And what I mean by this is sometimes the subject matter of a work of art is more what we are viewing, and a work's content can be different from that, and it can be more related to what the work is about. Sometimes they're the same thing. So, in the instance of a portrait, if this was a portrait of me and that's all we're getting in the image, I would be the subject matter. And, maybe the content, the artist's purpose for that is just to capture me, to record what I looked like at a specific time, and to preserve that for posterity's sake. Uh, Alternately, maybe the content is, overworked, tired art professor on Monday morning. Who knows? But usually, in the case of a portrait, the purpose is to capture a moment in time. But sometimes, even thinking about historic portraits of royal leaders throughout history, we do have them kind of like pumped up. You think about like pictures of kings on horses with swords and things like that. And so we are actually building them up. And so the content of those might be power. Power is a huge one. Also might be status, which is related to power, bravery, any of those things, any of those qualities that we're wanting to bring out in that person might be considered being part of the content, whereas the subject is far simpler. So I'm just going to show you two examples this morning just to get you thinking. So this is a painting by a North Carolina based artist. Her name is Katie Morrill. She actually teaches in Fayetteville at the college there. We had a show together last fall, so I was lucky to pick this one up from that show. Hopefully there's not too much of a glare. We'll do it this way. So what we see here is a winter scene in the woods. So I would say that that is the subject. We could even say the subject is just winter because we're seeing snow, we're seeing trees, and we're not seeing any like greenery really. So we could say the subject is winter. We could also get a little more complicated and start identifying things. We could say the subject is a landscape in the woods in the winter, and we might guess as to the location even. If we're talking about the work's content, we might think about the different feelings that this scene evokes or different concepts. So maybe content wise, we're talking about isolation, solitude, and those two things are similar, but not the same. So isolation can be a negative thing, whereas solitude is peaceful. It's something we are seeking. Solitude is when you're, curling up with a book on your couch and you're just like so glad to be out of the hubbub of the day. So peace might be another word that we would associate with the content of this painting. So subject matter going to be a winter scene, and then the content might be peace, solitude, could also be nature, the beauty of nature. So these are just things to think about. Also, if I was discussing this piece for my formal analysis, things that I might want to think about, so you can see the way the light is hitting this piece does have a physical surface texture. So that might be something you want to talk about when you're visiting works in a museum, in a gallery, just anytime. You're not meant to touch the artwork. So don't be this up close and personal with the work. But this is in my personal collection, and so I'm just sort of holding it very carefully from the sides. But know that if a work does have physical texture, you would be able to feel it if you touched it. I'm not going to, but you can see those ridges built up. You can also see the way she's created some visual texture here. So when we talk about physical texture, we're talking about texture you can feel. So if I ran my hands along those wood planks on the wall, I would feel those ridges. Visual texture is going to be texture that is implied through the artist's use of paint. So we do have some visual texture that's implied here, whereas we are still on the 2D plane, so it doesn't have a ton of physical texture in that part of the painting. Other things we might want to talk about here are the artist's use of color. She has a limited color palette, so not using the full spectrum of colors, mostly cool tones. So when we talk about a work's temperature, which is not always relevant, it might be warm or cool depending on the palette used. And I would say this is definitely a cool toned picture, which also leads to that feeling of winter, of being cold physically. We might also talk about the artist's use of shadow and light. So we just have sort of this bright highlight back here. The background is mostly in shadow, but we do have this like implied depth that the woods continue for a while. We also have this nice sort of line that's created here that brings you around the picture. The trees are very linear. We've got vertical lines happening there. So these lines going this way, as well as this line going this way, those help guide our eye around the canvas. And these are all just observations that would be great going into your formal analysis. So once you've read the instructions for assignment 1, don't be overwhelmed. Just remember, it's not a research paper. So this is something that you are writing based solely on what you are seeing when you're looking at that piece of art. Just describe to me what you see and then interpret it for me. I am going to look at one more piece just to talk to you a little bit more about subject matter and content, which is not discussed super in depth in your text. So this is a screen print by actually one of your USC Upstate professors. So this is by Frida Sue in the art department. She does a lot of our printmaking classes as well as color and comp, drawing, 2D. She might be your advisor. So this is a print that she did a limited edition of for the holidays a few years ago. And I think it's a great example of discussing subject matter versus content, because the subject matter is very simple. We're looking at this print of a snow globe, asking myself, what's the subject matter? It's a snow globe. But then thinking about the content, like it feels very magical, so we might think of the holidays, but we also might think of winter because we have this snow. You guys are probably getting that I really like winter. So I do have a collection of work related to the season. But it could also be related to nostalgia. So thinking about collecting snow globes, the magic of like shaking that globe and seeing the snow come down. I grew up in Florida, so snow is pure fantasy for me growing up. And the snow globe just really brought it to life. So there's a lot of different ideas that could be encompassed in this representation of a snow globe. So just thinking about identifying the subject and then thinking about, what the content of the piece might really be, what the artist might be trying to convey with that. I'm going to keep this short just because I do have some other videos related to analysis of an artwork that I'd love for you guys to watch. I hope your week is starting off great and have a great day. Email me if you have any questions.